My last bit of research that I'm obsessed with and slow improvisation. I've been researching the research on lichen. It's wildly unruly. It seems to refuse to be an object of science at all. Lichen calls forth poetic surprise from researchers. Lichens are highly successful yet confounding entities. And through this, I started to notice how much the concept of time got in the way of both my thinking and theirs. Slowness emerged as a term to work with. My current hypothesis is that lichen are slow partying and supportive napping. Slowness, I've learned, is one of their superpowers. It also makes it really hard to study. Some lichen grow 1 millimeter every 100 years. Some lichen are 9,000 years old. So we are a blip. Lichens are the dominant life forms in about 12% of the Earth's land surface. They are everywhere. The largest amount of biomass in the air we breathe are lichenizable components, spores of fungi, algae, and bacteria. Much of these are lighter than air. Effectively, we can say that lichen potential is always landing, and it's the slowness of a surface that helps determine whether detectable visible lichen appear. Turtles, trees, glass, rocks, these are all venue managers for slow partying. Lichen forms where for all other life, there is no environment. Lichenization effectively brings environment into existence, creating microenvironments that facilitate more diverse lichen and eventually litters or filters soil and potential ecologies into existence. More than 18,000 named species of fungi participate in lichen, so they're both super slow and super promiscuous. They definitely force the researchers to reach toward a language like hacking, though I haven't seen that language used in their work so far. These researchers are constantly surprised at the level of improvisation taking place continually within lichen. Unlike majority partner symbionts that provide a backbone or scaffold, the components of lichen symbiosis do not undergo cell-fate differentiation and subsequent tissue development. Although the dominant fungi in lichen are multicellular, every cell is totipotent. The complex three-dimensionality and structural integrity characteristic of many lichens instead results from component parts gluing each other into place with extracellular polymers as the assemblage grows. One of the most dedicated researchers, Rosemary Honegger, stated in 1992 in an overview on the developmental biology of lichens, quote, "It's important to note that most lichen are consortia with an unknown number of participants rather than individuals. Neither the fungal biomass nor the photobiont cell population of an individual thallus needs to be genetically uniform, as many parts from different origins may join in pre-thalli and later stages of development, joining up with other lichen in amazing ways." The official term for lichen now is consortia or lifestyle. Lichen pulls researchers into poetry. This top image is from an article about the cryptogamic crust that forms in the Atacama Desert in Chile where nothing else grows, and the title of the paper is Desert Breath. Seeing our own playfulness reflected in the playfulness of lichen, and I emphasize this since the evidence seems to point to lichen as hanging out and slow parting in most of its formations, constantly exploring possible pattern spaces, morphologies, and partnerships. You could say its nonchalant attitude toward environmental constraints and scarcity derived from not viewing it as an already committed organism or community. Trevor Goward has perhaps put forward the closest thing to a manifesto for letting lichen lead biology. He calls himself a pattern ecologist, and he tends directly to the ways that the questions we ask, the perspectives we take as researchers, determine the kinds of answers and the liveliness and intelligence of the things we study. Lichens, he says, but especially macrolichens, exist as a kind of conceptual doorway, a portal. When we look out this portal in one direction through the microscope, what we see is multiplicity. The lichen as its parts, as fungus, as algae, symbiosis, and ecosystem. But when we peer through the same portal in the other direction at a macro scale, what comes into focus now is unity. The lichen as emergent property, as physiologic entity, as organism. The real conceptual challenge posed by the lichen thallus derives from its unsettling capacity for transmutation at even the slightest shift in perspective. A symbiotic phenotype, organism, ecosystem, emergent property, and so on. Other researchers propose that multi-species biofilms and lichen are coterminous. One could even posit that lichen began as biofilms and through millions of years of coevolution with symbiont partners developed into the highly coordinated and more permanent lichen thallus. Using electron microscopy and other techniques, Ursula Goodenough a few years ago found that numerous bacterial species produce structurally diverse matrices on the lichen surfaces, helping create and maintain a polyol fog that enables some of lichen's superpowers, a fog produced by fungi and lichen that the fungi produces nowhere else. Hence, bacteria provide not only metabolic products, but also physically participate in lichen construction. I want to conclude by thinking with Goward as with Lichen as conversation, returning to this question of hacking, playing, and conversing, the language with which we language agency. This is much like saying that the inner workings of the lichen have the form of a conversation between the constituent parts. For the lichen truly is the conversation of which the constituent parts are the participants and the thallus the outward physical manifestation. Here it helps to recall that though they look and behave like organisms, nevertheless operate as systems. This means, for example, it's not quite right to say that lichens grow. As a matter of fact, plants and animals and fungi hyphae all grow, but lichen thalli elaborate. Lichens are more like a good conversation, each following its own internal logic, no two thalli coming out quite the same.